Hello, and welcome back to the World of Wysteria. This afternoon, I will be reading Chapter 10. And for your information, we are now on page 71. There are, I think, 348 pages total, so we are pretty much exactly 1/5 of the way through the novel. And with that, Wysteria, Chapter 10, and this will be presented in 2 parts. So, well, that was exciting, said Emily. Where did you learn to fight like that? Will laughed. Exciting, huh? A little scary, too, she admitted. But it was nice to see those idiots get thrashed like that. What happened to the don't antagonize them approach? He asked her with a chuckle. I'm sorry, Will. I just couldn't hold my tongue. Emily looked at the ground as if conceding her guilt. It's okay, he said, smiling. I don't blame you. Besides, it was going to be a fight. I wouldn't have been able to persuade them to leave. I think you did a pretty good job of persuading them, she countered. They'll probably both be sore tomorrow night. Really? Oh yes, she said. You injured their dream bodies, and they could have injured yours. That's what I was trying to explain to you before the fight. You can be hurt in a dream. Even though our dream bodies disappear when we wake up, unless we fall asleep here, it's as if we recreate the same body each night. It's another one of those things I don't completely understand, but it has something to do with the continuity of lucid dreams. Just as we retain memories from night to night, we also retain other things, like injuries and pain. They won't have the injuries when they wake up, she continued. Their waking bodies won't be affected, but they'll feel them when they dream again. For how long? Will asked. That depends, she said. A few days, maybe a week. Things recover much quicker here. It's the nature of things in the dream universe. Will thought for a moment. Can a dream body die? He asked. Theoretically, it's possible, Emily replied. However, a dreamer should wake up before things get to that point. It's a powerful natural instinct. That big guy was hurt bad enough that he had to leave the dream. It was too painful for him to stay here. He might have been able to resist, but it would have taken a lot of willpower. The other man chose to leave. He knew he couldn't beat you. I don't think he woke up, though. He just left your world. Why do you think that? He asked. The way he disappeared, she answered. It looked different. But where did he go if he didn't wake up? I don't know, she said. Perhaps back to Nathan's world, although he might have been too embarrassed to tell him what happened, especially that he ran away. Drifters consider themselves tough guys. I suppose I've made enemies now, said Will. Do you think they'll be back? Emily thought for a second. Maybe, she said. But they're not accustomed to having people stand up to them. They may just decide to avoid this world. There are enough other places out there for them to terrorize, places where they won't be challenged. As they were talking, townspeople began to emerge from doorways and come back out into the square. They returned cautiously, like prey, fearing that a predator might still be lurking about. Will looked at their faces, which were no longer wearing the smiles he was accustomed to seeing. "Don't worry, they're gone," he said loudly, with an air of authority. But though several thanked him, they still seemed ill at ease. "I don't like this mood," he said to Emily. "It will pass," she replied. "I'm afraid it will take a while for them to feel safe again," he said. "You're also afraid it will be hard for you to feel at peace here now, aren't you?" she remarked. "Yes," said Will, "I suppose so. And I know what that will lead to." "Then change the mood," she said. "Don't let this incident make too deep an impression on you, or on this world." Will understood that he had to let this go. It would be difficult, though. He hated the idea of people violating his worry-free world. "You couldn't have built this kind of world unless it was in your nature to let negative energy pass right through you," said Emily. "Jeremy said that you have a mind, let me see, remarkably unaffected by others." Will smiled. "What else did he say?" "He said that you have a strong sense of what you want and what you believe, and that's why your world is so free of conflict and so stable," she told him. "I am very much a live and let live person," Will told her. "I really don't care what other people think or do. I try to give them the benefit of the doubt and assume they're all trying to find happiness, even if I don't understand their choices. However," he continued, "I draw the line when people actually invade my space and try to hurt me or others. And that's fine. You should," she said. "But I can tell it's not just their actions that upset you. It's the principle of the thing." "Yes," he conceded. "That's why it's hard for me to forget about it." He knew that these discordant thoughts and feelings would manifest themselves in Wysteria, and this began causing him even more anxiety and anger. Will could feel the snowball beginning to roll. It had to be stopped before it gathered momentum. He couldn't let these two sorry drifters disturb the tranquil tenor of his world. "You're right, Emily. It's over." Will took her hands. "And it was kind of exciting, wasn't it?" he said, grinning. "Yes, it really was." "Okay," he said. "So what should we do to change the mood?" "How about a party?" she suggested. "A party?" "Yes, a big party," she said. "A town festival." Will thought for a second, then smiled. "That's a great idea." "Excellent," said Emily, giving him a kiss. "When?" "How about the day after tomorrow?" he proposed. "That should give me enough time. I guess we'll need to make some kind of announcement." "I think you should tell them," she said. "I'll get their attention." Emily then turned and faced the middle of the square. "Good citizens of Wysteria," she cried, "please pay heed to your lord." "Lord?" said Will. "Sure, why not?" she replied. "These are your lands, and you have a castle. Doesn't every castle need a lord?" Will laughed. "I suppose so." He walked to the center of the square and stood next to the fountain, while the people gathered around him. 2 days from now, We will have a grand celebration, a festival, he proclaimed. The assembled crowd cheered in unison. Please spread the word throughout the town, he continued. The festival will begin at noon. Now, please enjoy the rest of your day. Tomorrow, we'll begin the preparations. The townspeople then dispersed, chatting excitedly amongst themselves, their faces now smiling. I can't wait to see what you come up with, said Emily, as they began making their way across the plaza toward the southern gate. Neither can I, he laughed. But I'm already getting some ideas. I'm sure you are, Will. As they passed through the gate and headed back down the street toward the garden, Will had a thought. Something just occurred to me, he said. Don't you think it's a strange coincidence that those two men showed up so soon after you told me about drifters? Emily stopped and looked at him. You don't think that I had something to do with them coming here, do you? No, he told her. That's not what I meant. What if I created them? You created them? Think about it, Emily. After we talked about the subject, it was on my mind, and I felt anxious about the possibility of strangers invading Wysteria. I'm sure it made an impression on my subconscious, which could have led to their creation. I understand what you're saying, she replied, but they were real drifters, Will, not just dream characters. I'm sure of that. How can you be certain, he asked her. Well, for one thing, they recognized me, she said, and they were Nathan's men. You didn't know anything about Nathan, did you? Will had forgotten about that. That's true, he said. I suppose the only way they could be dream characters in my dream is if you were my creation too. Emily laughed. So you think I might be a dream girl, do you? Of course not, he responded. Sorry, I guess I didn't think that theory through. Obviously, it had to be a coincidence. Actually, she said, I think it may be more than mere happenstance. What do you mean? He asked. Let me put it this way, said Emily. You didn't create them, nor can you control them. But you do create your world, all of it. And today, those men became a part of your world. As Will pondered her paradoxical explanation, they came to the garden doorway and stepped inside. Are you saying that I brought them here? He said. Not brought them here, she replied, but you might have sent them an invitation. How? He asked. Your strong feelings about malicious strangers invading your space were part of the signal that your world sent out into the universe. Those two drifters happened to be the ones who tuned into that frequency. They were looking for trouble, and they found it. Unfortunately for them, she said, laughing. Is that how traveling works? Will asked. Do travelers discover a world by following a signal? In a way, said Emily. It's like tuning yourself to a frequency and then finding a signal that matches it. When I want to find a new place to visit, I concentrate on a feeling, sometimes an image, but usually an emotion or mood. I become a vibration and I just let go. I don't know how else to describe it. Then I travel to a world that matches it. Once you've been to a world, is it easy to find it again? He asked her. It depends, she said. It's easy once you have a key. Otherwise, it can be tricky. What's a key? It's sort of like an anchor, she replied. Some people call it a clue. It's something that helps lead you back to that world, something specific, a mental or emotional cue that triggers the alignment. So, what's the key you use to find Wysteria? He asked. Lilacs, she answered. And we will return very shortly with part 2.